Okay. So how do you pronounce your last name? Is that
Deramo. A lot of
Deramo?
people say Deramo, and it's really annoying, but I always gotta correct them. But
Oh,
it's pronounced exactly as it's spelled.
Mark Deramo. All right. So you mentioned you are pretty active in the freedom movement. Are you part of like any organization?
I am. There's a lot of drama going on in the world today, as we both know. A lot of problems in front of us. Here's what I see that's really bad. Everybody seems to be looking for a savior, that one guy who will solve everything for us while we just sit back and vote. Conservatives think that Trump will be our savior. Liberals think the answer is more and more government interfering in our lives. They want us to be ruled by science. Some moderates say a third party candidate like RFK Jr. will be our answer. Religious people think that God will be our savior. Here's the cold, hard reality: none of that is going to work. No person is going to parachute onto the White House front lawn, wave a magic wand, and solve everything for us. With that being said, a lot of people in the so-called freedom movement um, think that they're doing something productive. But most people don't know what it actually means to make a difference. It takes more than just not complying with the New World Order. I understand that the government has kind of brainwashed people's minds into thinking that the government is the solution to everything. But with so much greed, corruption, incompetence, and I'll use the word evil that we see on a daily basis, there's so many action steps needed to fix the current state of the world. To me, it seems like we're living in the unhappiest of times. Most advanced as it relates to computers, cell phones, technology, and AI, and all of that. But I don't think that translates to people's overall happiness and state of well being. We don't have the ability to control other people's actions, but we do have control over our own actions. And that should be good enough to create change.
I see. Do you think it might have something to do with social media on why people are unhappy?
Absolutely. That has perpetuated the decline, and people have become addicted to it. And I think that's declined by design, by the government allowing these companies to put more and more out there and to rely on it. Just look at all of the money that we as a society collectively throw away. Millions upon millions of dollars are wasted yearly on things like football games, rock concerts, Netflix subscriptions, social media, political campaigns, lottery tickets, the court system, lawsuits and appeals that accomplish nothing. I mean, GoFundMe's for people that we don't even know, uh, financial support going to podcasters so they can keep bringing you the same content every single day. In other words, pointless things. Here's what I say: why can't a small portion of those millions of dollars that we collectively flush down the toilet be put to better use, such as helping to improve society? Am I way off base for asking that question?
Just, where are you leaning politically? Just out of curiosity.
Conservative.
Not really.
Yeah.
You religious?
No, I'm not. Um, but I know it is important to a lot of people. Um, but I just think that there are so many other ways that money could be spent more productively. And I'm not talking about the 40% that the government steals from us that in taxes. Some people say that our biggest problem that we're on is the corrupt money system, that the Federal Reserve sucked us into many years ago. And I understand where those people are coming from. I do. But whatever we have, we need some way to do exchange. Okay. Whatever we do, we should start using the extra currency, whatever it is, on the resources needed that will enable us to build our own off the grid communities, which I think will allow human beings to start thriving again. And I think that's the answer to most, if not all, of our problems today. Um,
Okay. Um, so, do you think like people should be like advocating for more like charity from wealthier people or organizations, like not necessarily like a government forcing them to spend money on other issues? But do you think people?
yes, I've never been that big on charities because we can't confirm where all of our contributions go. Um, we got to just ask ourselves, what do we really need to get our country back on track? Well, for one, we need a totally new healthcare system, one that isn't corrupt to the core and run by the state. We could also use a new revamped education system, a new revamped higher education system, not radical left indoctrination camps like what the Ivy League schools have become.
You know,
We could benefit from a new high-speed rail system so people can travel between states without having to rely on cars and gasoline all the time. Because I think we're too dependent on cars and it does affect the environment. Um, some countries in Asia, they have a well-developed rail system, and I think that's pretty convenient. Um, that's one thing that they do much better than here in the Western world. We could also benefit from new ways to grow and use the earth to produce our own food that's healthy and not the food that the media, puts out there like in these ads, fast food and stuff that's mass produced and all of that. Now, I know that I'm kind of sounding like I'm living in a fantasy world about all of this, and people might be like, that's never going to happen. You know what you're asking by all of that. But my point is, I don't think we should read any more books or listen to any more podcasts or watch people babble in front of a computer all day because we've done enough of that. It's not bad to do that. It's just that, we need to go to step number two. At this point, we have to start applying our knowledge that we've gained from doing all of that and put it into doing. We have to start taking control of our own sovereignty because the America as we know it will it might cease to exist in the next couple years if we don't start paying attention to what's going on. The government is way out of control these days. It's
mm,
so dysfunctional that it's unable to fix itself. The swamp in DC has become too big to drain. Um, some people have brought to the table some very good ideas on how to improve society, and they're all great ideas. And I won't say nothing has been done about it, but I think very little has been done. Very little action has been taken on these ideas. So, of all the areas of life that people have brought up about improving society, I find it interesting that nobody has mentioned air travel.
Mhm.
And that's surprising to me because that's the area that's been corrupted by tyranny the most. Would you agree with that or
I was
or
actually
disagree?
I was actually gonna ask you about that since in our emails, that's what we were actually uh discussing. Like you wanted to talk about like flight alternatives, and that's actually news to me. You mentioned there being human rights violations in airlines, right?
Right.
Could you explain that to me? I really did not know anything about that. What kind of
Sure.
violations?
Before 9/11, you would enter the airport in a good mood, okay,
Hmm.
when traveling somewhere. You'd go up to the counter and ask for assistance, and he or she would smile, answer your questions with direct eye contact, and provide that first class customer service. People knew how to communicate. Your privacy was respected, and you weren't treated like a terrorist simply for being there. And then in the plane, you were served by flight attendants who worked for you and wanted to be there. And then right after that horrible day happens, the government punishes us for being victims of something that we had nothing to do with. And then everything goes quickly down the drain in the flight industry. These agencies, such as the DHS and TSA, spring up within 24 hours without anybody ever voting on it or agreeing to it. They violate all kinds of privacy laws and start imposing whatever egregious measures on travelers that they want, stopping just short of requiring travelers to take off their pants and shirts while going through security. Now, fast forward to the present day. What has changed regarding the flying experience? And that was over 23 years ago. Has anything gotten better? To me, it doesn't seem like anything has. And by the way, I never got to fly before 9/11 too. I just heard about how wonderful it was to fly back then. And that kind of eats at me. And so what the airports and airlines have forgotten is that their only responsibility is to take us from point A to point B at a specific time in an efficient manner. That's it. Not to violate our rights in the process or be our nanny and take care of our health. But they lost that way of thinking because they operate under the control of the government, and the government lost that way of thinking a long time ago. So you look around at all the violations, the terrible customer service, all in the name of technology advancing. Every traveler being stuck in their phones from the moment they arrive till the moment they leave the airport. The abuse tactics and surveillance that you're subjected to. You have to pay $50 in most cases to check a bag. You even have to pay to print your boarding pass these days in most cases. Airport food is grossly overpriced. Nothing about this constitutes a happy, healthy environment conducive to human well being. So let's just call a spade a spade. They don't want us to be comfortable while flying. If they did, we wouldn't be in this position that we're in with so many problems everywhere and people complaining about it. But nobody's doing anything about it. The way to fix this situation is not by doing nothing and waiting on the government to make it all better, because that's never going to happen. The way to fix it is by us mobilizing and stop funding their system that they created if we fly, and instead we create our own system. So we need to get people away from the airports and start coming up with better alternatives to fly. I'd say more user-friendly, passenger-friendly ways. And I'll give an example. Kind of like in Alaska, where they don't have many highways to drive on. If Alaskans feel the need to go to another location that's kind of far, they rely more on air travel instead of cars because it's more economical, believe it or not. So we could create a system like that here in the continental United States, and I would love to see that. However, the downside to that is that it takes a specific vision and some work to get it done, but it's definitely doable. All we have to do is work together.
So when it came to air travel, post 9/11, the new restrictions they started having were like the more what's the word I'm looking for? Like the more um strict rules they had for passengers. Do you think that may have been a little justifiable, understandable at the time? Like, do you think they should have just started like relaxing a bit on those over the years?
Yes. Um, when the threat of terrorism was much higher back then, and we were sleeping on the job that day, and we were primed for an attack, and we had no idea of knowing, it was more justified. But again, that was so long ago, and we need to start getting past that and put the rights back into citizens again, especially when it comes to air travel. I don't think any part of it is justified today, 2 decades later. So here's what I'm doing. I am forming a network, an open network of citizens across the country who want to fly, but not have to deal with the ridiculousness of the airports and airlines, because they probably won't change. Anybody who wants to be a part of this just pays, like, let's say $100 per year, which isn't a lot of money, all right, into a fund via Cash App, check, or cash if I know you in person. And that all goes towards the resources needed to start an operation like this. I've already put up a substantial amount of my own money for this, along with a few other people. But it will take a lot more than that because this is no small task. So we ask ourselves, what do we need? What goes into this? Definitely support, not just from a few individuals, but from many individuals, motivation, dedication, a specific vision, people who want to make a difference in this world. And a lot of people hearing this will want to know where their $100 per year, and it doesn't have to be 100. I'm just throwing that out as a number. They'll want to know, what am I supporting? What's it going to? Well, for one, we're going to need fuel for the airplane, like gasoline for cars, okay? Another thing is we're going to need regular maintenance for the airplane to keep it in tip-top shape. Flight training for our pilots. The necessary licenses and certifications that we need. Insurance. Tie down. Hangar fees. A landing strip where our plane can take off and safely land. A location where it can be stored safely, like a home base for it. I'm sure there's going to be airport fees every once in a while, depending on where we fly into. And the airplane itself, as a starting point, which is always the biggest obstacle. Anything else that maybe our viewers are thinking of that I'm not currently thinking of? So a lot goes into this. And then if more and more people want to become a part of this and join, they just hit me up and their contribution will go towards the exact same things. Because, thinking positively, maybe down the road, we could have enough small planes in our network that would cater to a bigger number of people. No guarantees. I'm not saying we'll be successful in doing this because I can't predict the future. Nobody can. But it would be great to try. It would be a great goal to have. To form the beginnings of fundamentally changing the culture of flying here in America.
So, what got you interested in this topic? Because it seems like a really specific thing, to try to like focus on like human rights and freedom on. Because like a lot of people are concerned about like gun rights, some people are concerned about indoctrinations, free speech. But like you're here talking about flying, that's kind of like a unique topic.
Because I don't see anybody else who has brought this to the table. What do people like to talk about online? Gun rights,
Yeah,
abortion,
yeah,
elections. I kind of want to branch away from that and look at a different situation that people could say, oh, yeah, this sounds pretty exciting. This is different than the norm, something that we could have control over and create ourselves. And I've always had this motivation to fly and see the world. I've been to a few places, not a lot, but that drive for freedom and to see other places, that has never died in me since that fateful day, a long time ago. It didn't crush my motivation to, stay home all day. It brought it out of me. And I'm sure people, with other people, it's the same. They have an urge, a desire in them to get outside their community and travel and fly freely. But nobody has ever talked about this. So I would not shed one tear if all the airlines go bankrupt. I know that might be a little mean to say, but I would even go as far as to say I would like that to happen, but being realistic, it probably won't. Even if we're supposed to feel sorry for all of the workers at the airlines who got laid off during the pandemic or scamdemic, whatever you want to call it, for not wanting to take the jab, I don't feel sorry for them because they were the ones who supported the unnecessary, illegal, illogical tyranny that was heaped upon us at the time. Believe me, I was on a flight during then and it was horrible. So I'm speaking from experience. The flight attendants and pilots could have very easily stood up and said, no, we're not going to wear or enforce the masks because they make all of us look stupid. They're dangerous to human health. There's no science behind any of this. And it's a violation of human rights to require somebody else to take part in medical experiments as a condition to fly or patronize any place of public accommodation. So there was and there continues to be no law on the books that says we have to join a public health cult just because somebody in our government declared a fake pandemic or emergency. And the problem is during that time, none of the airline employees were strong enough to do that, or at least 99% of them didn't. they all chose to take part in evil and disrespect their own customers' right to privacy. And it took that federal judge in Florida, I believe it was April of 2022, who said that all of that stuff was unconstitutional. And that's when things kind of changed back and loosened up. But the people at the airlines should not have needed a federal judge to tell them that what they were doing was wrong. All they needed to do was to be honest with themselves and use common sense.
I see.
So ever since then, it's kind of been impossible for me to forgive them for what they did to us. That's why we need to break away from them and create our own flight community that is freedom and liberty minded, self sufficient, transparent, and respects human rights.
I see. Yeah, I recently went to Vegas for Freedom Fest, and I obviously wasn't going to drive there. Honestly, like I don't air travel that often. It was a bit of a new experience for me. It,
Not a lot of people do, yeah,
yeah,
including myself. I don't fly that often.
yeah. I mean, obviously, people love to air travel, because it
Right.
gets them places. They always wanted to see that they obviously can't fucking drive to. But yeah, for me, it really I didn't really notice anything that big of a deal. One thing I thought was kind of weird though was what they allow you to carry on in your backpack. Like they had to throw away my toothpaste because it wasn't the right size, or the shaving cream because it wasn't the right travel size. I just didn't really understand those measurements.
There's no logic, reason, or science behind that. At the time, they were saying, well, that terrorist in the Middle East tried to make a bomb and put it in toothpaste. So, oh, you're all punished because of it. That's what it is. That's the excuse that they gave. Somebody tried to put a bomb in their underwear and sneak on a flight. How does that relate to us? Why do you punish all kind of people over the in the world because of something that they didn't do, because of a little threat? You deal with that individual, whoever's being stupid. It never sat well with me, and it never will. I know that this stuff bothers a lot of people who travel, but it's nobody has taken the step to make it better. And it, the thing is, like, can you imagine how much happier people would be if we created our own way to fly? That where it's on our terms. I'm not talking about paying several $1,000s to a private charter company where you're still at the mercy of them for everything and still supporting a top-down centralized power structure similar to the airlines. I'm talking about like where we do the work and on our own terms, where with our own plane, where we control the operation. Exit the corrupt, tyrannical systems that we're powerless to change, and then we ourselves create a parallel society in this field of air travel. You can do this in just about any area of life, but this is my focus in what I'm interested in. It's something new and original. That is the exit and build philosophy in a nutshell. Um, I've never believed that you should have to deplete your bank account in order to fly freely and unimpeded by going to a charter company. That doesn't solve our problem.
People do love independent stuff, and some people prefer private schools over public ones. I've been hearing Michael Shermer talking about how he's so freaked out about the indoctrination in universities. He and his wife were talking about getting his kid into like a private Catholic school. Private combo companies are doing better than the big ones. I think people might be more interested in like a private airlines compared to the.
Right. It's, so here's an example of how somebody could benefit from this. You know,
Mhm.
they're still not exactly getting what I'm saying. Um, say you live in rural Virginia, it could be any state. You have a sudden death in your family, and you need to get home to Northeast Ohio to see your family, an emergency. The closest airport to where you're at is Roanoke, and you have to fly into Cleveland. So you drive an hour and a half south to get to the Roanoke airport through mountains and forests. You have to pay about $30 per day to park your car. I'm guessing that. I've never done it, but a lot of money to leave your car there if you don't have a friend who will drive you that far. You first have to connect in some city, let's say Detroit, in order to get home because there are hardly any direct flights from Roanoke to anywhere else in the country. This is your best option.
Mhm.
After you land in, let's say, Cleveland, you still have to rely on somebody to drive you close to 2 hours to get back home where your family lives in the country. And so you paid around $800 out of pocket and gave up a full day of your life to put up with all of the abuse violations and tactics just to go 300 miles north to your final destination. That is the very definition of inconvenience. And when people see how inconvenient that is and start thinking about what they're funding every time they do something like that, they'll say, maybe we should do something about this after all these years. So that's the problem I'm trying to solve. Time and convenience by flying privately. If we build our own sustainable operation, you could fly out of a small airport, which could be 15 minutes away from where you live, not an hour. And you could fly into another small airport that is 20 minutes away from where your other family or friends live. And they have 20 minutes to go, to pick you up. You wouldn't have to go to the big cities and be forced to deal with traffic and all of that nonsense. And the great thing about having our own private aircraft, if it comes to that, that's the goal. Once you get one, it could be stored at a private airport in a rural area closer to where the people in our network live. We could come to you and take you to where you need to go. I'm just thinking hypothetically and putting out a vision. Um,
Solution, you always gotta get Elon Musk involved. He'll buy anything. Just gotta put an X on it.
yeah, these days X can be seen so often. He has so much influence in the media and public affairs, and I never bought into it that much.
Mm.
To me, he has made a good contribution in one area, but the rest of it, it's kind of a figure that has been put up on a platform that
I mean, this does sound like something he would be interested in, I think, because he does seem to prefer, less government, more independence. But yeah, like it's weird how many stuff is branched off to, space. Got SpaceX, we got electric cars with Tesla. Then for some reason, social media. He just bought Twitter. You know,
right.
maybe like private like airlines he might be interested in. Yeah, I heard he even made like his own private school just for his kids.
Really.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the word airline, and I am not using that word because that's billions upon billions of dollars that we don't have. That's why I'm phrasing this as a network of individuals that
Okay.
can grow and contribute. Um, an airline is so much goes into it, and yeah,
Okay.
is
Well, I just keep using that word because I don't know what else to use. But
exactly, and that's fine. That I'm just trying to get people to think differently and
mhm,
see, we don't have to use the airlines if we want to do this on our own terms. We just have to join up together and make it happen. And I will say that this idea is already in motion. Um, we already have the leadership in place to make this happen. I'm talking with a few individuals. We have somebody who is starting a website for it, and it's called Shooting Stars Air Travel,
mhm,
which is, I think, a good name. We have somebody who has verbally agreed to take care of the financial aspects of it.
yeah,
Um, we could use a flight instructor, a fuel mechanic, a scheduling planner, public relations specialist, somebody who talks well and has a platform and could market this idea out to the public at large. Um, so if anybody out there has talents or abilities or knowledge that lie in those areas and wants to help us out, be inspired by this, great. Feel free to reach out to me directly.
yeah. Well, I unfortunately don't know anybody, but this is like a really ambitious idea. I mean, it's great that you already got some people interested though, but well, you already listed a lot of the things you need, a lot of the people you need, a lot of like places to land and places to like lift off from, and you need like the trained pilots. It's gonna require a lot, like way more than a private school or a private company or a combo company would need, you know.
Right.
Might take a long time, yeah, but hopefully it'll be worth it.
Mhm. I'm in it for the long haul. Is it also requires patience,
Yeah.
something that most people don't have. Um, and the thing is, private pilots are so hard to come by these days, and mainly because they're so controlled by the system in place. You know,
Mhm.
you would think that pilots would be responsive, freedom minded, forward thinking, express an eagerness to share their time and talents with the world. But what I've come to know about them is quite the opposite. It seems to me, maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that they just want to follow orders, complain about the cost of fuel, and give excuses as to why they can't fly people to where they want or need to go. Now, I'm aware that nobody is obligated to fly anybody anywhere. It's a big thing. It's not like driving somebody anywhere, but I mean, come on, don't you want to get something out of all of that flight training and those certifications that you spent all of your own time and money on getting? Because they always say, oh, I don't fly too often. I have a license, but I don't do it. It's so dangerous, or I'm retired. And I've just never understood that mindset. Um, but there's stories and videos out there about pilots and passengers passing out in midair because of the effects of the forced, this. I don't know how true those are. I just take them lightly at face value, and people speaking out against all of that, lawsuits being filed. All of that is nice, but what positive comes from all of that? When it all comes down to it, nothing is going to be done. No payouts to the victims,
Mhm.
no public apologies. Do we ever see those? Nobody from these tyrannical government agencies is going to be ordered to prison, because as long as we have government, the court system in place will always be set up to defend the government agency, regardless of who is in the right and who is in the wrong. It's all under the disguise of safety first. People just have to understand that the airlines and airports aren't going to fix themselves because nothing else is going to fix themselves when you operate under the control of the government. So politicians won't make improvements or kindly asking the FAA to fix something. We have to get past that outdated way of thinking and create our own future. Now, what I would like to do is rid the world of what's it called, statism or authoritarianism.
Okay.
And that's why I consider myself to be more of a volunteerist. I don't believe in the whole idea of government. You have the biggest perpetrator of misinformation, misrepresentation, law breaking, and problems being caused in society. That's from the government, not citizens. I would like anybody out there to give me one example, just one, of a man-made problem, not a natural disaster like a hurricane, but a problem going on in the world today that has not been caused by government.
I'm
So
thinking,
far, I have not heard anything to
yeah,
answer my question.
yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me of that quote by Ronald Reagan: "People don't start wars, governments do."
Exactly.
Yeah.
The pointless overseas wars being funded with our tax dollars.
Mhm.
Did citizens decide to do that? The lack of equal application of the law, billions going to fund big pharma, the assault on our natural rights in the flight industry, these kind of deaths or injuries due to the unconstitutional mandates. And I don't like to use the word mandate because there's no such thing as a mandate, but only a court can mandate you to do something. That's just the word they use to mess with the language. I should say measures or orders. All of the senseless, innocent deaths that have resulted over the years due to religion, um, censorship, you could go on and on. All of that has transpired throughout history, all due to the evils of government. So, yeah.
I mean, I always saw government as just a necessary evil because without it, people still like break off into groups, still try to um, collectivize in some way. I don't think there's ever been a situation when an anarchistic society could have ever worked or a complete direct democracy ever worked. Um, I did like what Percy Shelley had to say about it when he said, only the vices and evils of humanity make government necessary, but when all men would be good and wise, government would just cease existing. And I agree with that statement.
Mm-hmm.
We can't really function without it, but the more we have, it's just as bad, if not worse.
Yeah. And there could be an argument made for it that if it did its job and represented the citizens in their best interest, there would be a purpose for government.
Yeah.
But that's not happening.
No.
There's too many people in the swamp that it's too hard to vote them all out. That's what they say. You go to the ballot box and make your voice be heard and vote. Well, we've been voting for years, decades, centuries, at least in this country. I know we haven't been around that long.
Mhm.
But the problem is people today, at least the ones who know what's going on, they still do nothing. And it's a continuing cycle of trying to change things through voting, and we've gone backwards as a country because of the continual emphasis placed on elections and thinking that the government actually cares about us and our well-being. Whenever we say that the next election is the most important election of our lives, we are creating fuel and sustenance for the government to keep doing what they're doing because we're giving our power and authority over to them. Too much of the population is still asleep thinking that our votes actually mean anything. If they, I can't say for sure if they do or they don't, we can't confirm anything, and because of all of that, we're seeing the decline because of all the brainwashing, in the media. So we need to go back to the values and principles that made America the greatest country on earth, with people forging out, thinking outside the box, going out of their comfort zone, self-reliance, self-sufficiency, being adventurous,
Mhm.
people developing hands-on skills so they can improve themselves. Our country was not founded on climate change, critical race theory, abortion, government handouts, expanding welfare, or trans rights. We were founded on human rights and conservative values, with liberty and justice for all being the two founding principles. So I think we have to start cooperating with each other in order to set up a decentralized volunteer society. Because that's what the early people who founded our country, who settled here, that's what they did. They got along fine without government, which formed after the American Revolution. I'm talking about the earliest people who settled here.
That does make me wonder what some of the founding fathers will be thinking of modern times with some of the issues they're talking about. Like I would love to hear Thomas Jefferson's take on the trans issue.
I'm sure they would be very sad and shocked at the way things are these days.
And they didn't even discuss, gay rights at the time. Like that was just something that never would have crossed anybody's mind. But now we
It
got the trans
didn't.
issue. And
Yeah, that's one of those talking points that has been heaped upon us in the media that they push and push. And I don't think anybody is against gay rights, but they're humans. They're the human race, like all of us. Everybody has their own preferences. Everybody has who they're attracted to, what they want, their urges and desires. If everybody keeps just doing that, stays and lives according to their beliefs and desires, without being so controlled by other forces, then I think we'll be much happier. And if we're more independent in our thinking, in our actions, and not relying on other people to solve our problems for us, these unelected, unwanted bureaucrats won't be able to control the population at large anymore. So, an example that I can think of is look at the Amish. I think they have the perfect model, wanting nothing to do with government while having some contact with the outside world. They are 100% self sufficient, content, and they seem to live peacefully amongst themselves. What's wrong with that? We can also do that if we get off our cell phones, get off social media, formally unite, and build a parallel society. Put our funds together, whether your favorite currency is gold, silver, greenbacks, the euro, the Chinese yen, investing in crypto. I know a lot of people are into that. Whatever's hot at the moment, that doesn't matter. All right. Throw all of that value into the same pot in order for us to use it to buy what's necessary to build the kind of society that we want to live in. You know,
I've actually interacted with the Amish a lot. My dad would take me to long drives to Amish farms to buy chickens and eggs and milk. Yeah, I do sometimes envy their lifestyle, because they're just like really hardworking.
Mhm.
Yeah, although I don't think I could handle that though, because I got a lot of allergies.
Mhm. If more people grew up living like that, they'd be used to it, and people would be more self-sufficient and live like that, be able to use their hands more. But since society has gotten away from that, and all we have to do is Google something,
Mhm.
it's this close to us, we've gotten lazy and we've gotten away from that. So um, I know some of these things that I would like or I'm asking for, it's not realistic. The times change, people change, but I do think there should be some awareness that um, we used to be much happier as a nation before all of this left-wing ideology started sweeping the nation, and that will eventually calm down in the future. I'd say it has reached its peak, and I consider myself an optimist. Is um, if people go back to their roots, what made our country what it was, I think we can establish the kind of society that we want to live in.
Well, I know, like according to Steven Pinker's work, that times have actually have gone better. Less violent, a lot safer. But it seems like public opinion on times have gone worse. One thing I can think of when I was reading Coleman Hughes's book, The End of Race Politics, he talked about this poll from a few decades ago on race relations in America and compared it to a recent one. People are more cynical about that. People think race relations have gotten even worse in this country, although you can clearly see that's not even the fucking case, like um, it's illegal to refuse somebody a job just because of their color of their skin. You can't refuse education to somebody. You can't segregate schools anymore. Um, there are more middle class black people or more black entrepreneurs than ever, but people seem to think it's gotten worse, even though it clearly hasn't.
Some things have gotten better.
Yeah.
Um, I think the big things have gotten worse, and which is what I take issue with. The biggest thing is people talk way too much, and there's no action. Like, I understand that people like to talk about certain things because it plays to people's emotions and feelings, but we're now in the year 2024, all right, and nothing is getting solved by continuing to talk about philosophy,
Mhm.
creation or evolution, the war in Gaza, the upcoming election. Those topics don't do anything to push society forward. They don't lead to any solutions. They
Mhm.
just elicit a response. And we should instead talk about more important matters, such as protecting our own sovereignty and how to not rely on the government anymore for our needs. And as free human beings, we should have a mutual understanding that we all have to share space on this planet. And it's on us to get along and make the most out of our lives while not infringing on anybody else's rights. We don't need the government or any written document from the government, like the Constitution. As wonderful as it is, we don't really need that to tell us that we are free human beings by nature. There are studies that have been done that show that humans are much better off without government, but again, that could be in a different topic. But relating all of this to flying, if we're choosing to fly with the airlines, we cannot be free because we're handing over our unalienable rights to these three-letter government agencies that nobody ever asked for in the first place. Like when they touch us inappropriately for pat downs, and when they unlawfully just take our perfume and throw it away because, oh, it's a liquid in a container. I mean, that's nonsense, especially after 24 years. But if we want to fly freely and safely the way human beings should, then it's on us to build that society, because nobody else out there is going to make the situation better for us. That's already been proven.
Yeah. I mean, like it does seem like more people, especially with my generation, is thinking that government is the answer. I have this one friend. He claims to be an anarchist. That's bullshit because he thinks government mandates, like with the vaccines, were necessary. He thinks that capitalism is really bad, and the solution is that we need to be more of a socialist economic system, not communist, since he sees that as a different thing. But he wants us to be more like the UK, which I think that's a shitty example. I think their healthcare system is even worse than ours. I think everybody agrees that we all have issues with our education system and our healthcare, but I don't think the solution is to try something that's already been done and is way fucking worse.
Right. Um, it, in the UK, the overall idea that those people have been taught is that you worship a king above you, the King of England,
Hmm.
and they believe that they're born of divinity, and that is passed through the bloodline and all, and it will never end. And I have a problem doing that, and or bowing before a king. It's here in the United States, we don't have kings, queens, emperors, monarchs. Our country was the only one that was founded on the basis that you and I are equal, and we can get into definitions of equality and equity and all that, but I think it's a waste of time even to go into detail about those words. We all should be focusing on our lives and our urges and desires. Well, our country was the only one founded on that premise. No other country has. They just bow allegiance to a king or a queen, and so these days, the people in our government have tried to take on that role, that they can just define something into existence like a law, and that the population has to listen. During COVID, it was the worst time for that because a lot of people bowed to tyranny. So that's why that whole time went on for as long as it did, until enough people finally woke up and stopped buying into the nonsense and said, no, you don't have to do this. All of this is unconstitutional. Having to wear masks going into a restaurant. There's no law that says you have to do that, or to take this in order to send your child to school. I never thought that America would steep so low that we would fall for that, but we did. Um, and so here we are. But it has gotten better. I just think people should be more proactive in doing, and have the change come from us and not this continual emphasis on voting other people to make the changes for us. We have to break away from that.
I think this would probably be a good time to end the discussion. I think we got a lot of information out of this. Better understanding on what you're going for, what you believe. So, what I like to do sometimes, I like to just end it with like the four random questions that has absolutely nothing to do with what we're talking about, just for the sake of knowing. So, just out of curiosity, who's your favorite U.S. president?
I would say Abraham Lincoln, because he held our nation together.
Mhm.
at a time when we needed a leader the most.
Yeah, is my favorite too. You bit more personal reasons, like emotional reasons, rather than like on the grander scale of his work. Although I do love that about him too. All right, so
Mhm.
second, who's your favorite founding father?
I would say Ben Franklin because he was so intelligent and possessed a desire for knowledge and to learn. He gave us so many inventions and contributions. So many people looked up to him during his lifetime. He didn't seem to get a big head with a huge ego. How can we confirm either way? But that's what it seems like. He was very humble, low key, and worked to um, make our country great.
He was very unique in my opinion. He loved to work out. Really big fan of dumbbells. From what I heard in a documentary, he apparently loved hookers, and
Okay, I didn't know that.
I heard a dozen skeletons were found under his basements. I'm going to assume it's for some kind of experimental reasons. Can't really confirm, but I'm gonna take a few guesses.
I think I heard something like that uh, years ago,
Yeah,
but it, yeah, you could be right.
I know he didn't seem like the type of guy who'd do anything, illegal, shall we say.
Right.
All right, so two more questions. What's your favorite book?
Danger in the Desert by T.S. Fields. It's more of a kid's book, but I read it every now and then. It's an adventure book about two junior high age kids who are kidnapped in their mother's station wagon and driven out by a evil man, and they are dropped off in the Arizona desert and left to die, and they have to rely on each other for survival because their car dies. They're not old enough to drive, and when it's out there, they have to use the resources and work together to get out of the situation and live to see the next morning. And did I say that they don't get along? So it's a feel good story that has always meant a lot to me through the years.
Interesting. Yeah, mine's Clockwork Orange. Definitely not a kid's book.
A
One,
Clockwork Orange.
yeah,
Okay, I saw the movie. I didn't read the book, but it's a very weird movie. I thought it's um, that's
it's
interesting.
it's my favorite movie too, and favorite book. There are like some differences between the book and the movie. Uh, I think the movie made some right calls on changing a few things, but like overall, I do love both of them. And last question: are you working on any books yourself at the moment, or planning to?
Currently, I'm not, but I am reading the Diary of Anne Frank because I always told myself I was going to make time to do that, and I finally uh, started doing that, and I'm about halfway through. So, not currently writing any books, but I'm back into reading. And writing a book is a possibility in the future, just not at the forefront of my mind right now.
Well, if you ever do, you could always try pitching it to Michael Shermer. He loves to read, and every time he has a podcast episode, it's always about the guest's book, which is I like about his podcast. He keeps like a open mind and a variety on like these different topics. Not sure if you're
Sounds
familiar.
good.
Not sure if you're familiar with Michael Shermer, but I'm a huge fan of the guy.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
am kind of familiar with his material. Yes, he's good.
yeah. All right, it was nice meeting you, man. Right.
Nice meeting you too. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, you too. And thanks for doing this. We were talking about this months ago, like back in November. I kind of blew it off for a little bit. Sorry about that.
It's okay. Uh, all good.
Oh yeah, but it was great meeting you, Mark.
You too. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.